and welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have Charleh Knighton. Charleh is a CEO of KUB Digital. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome Charleh Knighton.
Okay, nice to be on the show.
Charleh, I am so excited to have you on. I have to let our listeners know. So, Charleh actually has a podcast. I got to be on that podcast, and I felt like right away, Charleh has such a welcoming personality. I felt like we could talk forever.
Oh, thank you. That's like one of the highest compliments you can give, just making people feel so at ease. And also, like, we had so much fun.
I was just going to say, talk about fun. Like, I remember we were going through just a range of like emotions when it comes to sport. So just like laughing, like we could talk for days here, Charleh. So anyway, I want to welcome you on, and I cannot wait to jump into your background because boy, do you have an extensive background in sport, competing at the highest level in swimming. But before we get to that, if you could provide our listeners a background and an introduction of yourself, Charleh.
Yeah, sure. So from a sporting background, it is incredibly eclectic. But I am from a swimming family. I'm fortunate that my mum was also an international swimmer, so that was always the primary sport. But I did dabble in did athletics, modern pentathlon, gymnastics, skiing, and I did compete to like British champs level, medaled in multiple of all of these different sports. And as we'll talk about, like, no longer swim. I feel like I did that chapter, and now it's all about CrossFit.
That is incredible. So I'm going to dissect this because, as you know, on this podcast, I love talking about sport lessons. But if you could take it back, I know you mentioned that swimming kind of ran in your family and that your mother was an international swimmer. Was it the family influence that would kind of gear you into that, just seeing, of course, what mom had done in her past and just wanting to be like mom? Or was it just a general desire to go in that direction?
I think it is always like multiple factors, because one, is in children development, whatever the child sees, the child wants to do. So if I'm constantly watching my mum swim, and what she obviously carried on doing, like different swimming competitions well into my teenage years, so I'm watching somebody excel at a sport. But there's the other element of children will gravitate to the things that they love and they are passionate about. You really can't force a child down a road they don't want to go to. And my mum couldn't, like, I was addicted to the water, from a very early age. Like, I was that child my mum was having to drag out of the swimming pool, and I think when you see that in a child where they just want to live under the water, just want to be in that environment, obviously it's great because she's like, great, this is my sport. It was a very easy path to go down that I certainly wanted to go down.
And you also mentioned skiing too. Now, Charleh, skiing to me was one of those sports. I actually had a great fear for skiing. And my husband would say, like, here you are competing in gymnastics at the highest level, it's super dangerous, but you can't like ski, Courtney. And I'm like, because I remember I was going down like these like what green hills, I wouldn't even say they were mountains, like they were like hills basically. And we were laughing because he does these like black moguls. So my question to you is, like, are you at that very high level with like no fear that you'll just go down like a black mogul and take it on?
I'm gonna say I used to. So I feel really fortunate and grateful that I was taught what my parents describe it as the French way, and that as soon as I could walk, my parents put me straight onto skis. So as I was learning to walk and run, I was also learning to ski. And then because it's a sport that feels like breathing, like swimming, it just like feels like breathing. Like there was there was nothing stopping me going head first, down a mountain, or going as many jumps as I can, as many boxes I can, on mogul fields as I could. And I was doing all of that like before I was 10. And I feel that's really fortunate, because the fear really doesn't kick in until you start getting to a teenager. And actually, only the fear, I do have fear now. One, because I've had like knee surgery. I'm also I'm in my 30s, and something I think goes off in women where we become a lot more self-aware about self-preservation. And I feel like a switch has gone off. So mogul fields is my playground. I love it. But what I don't do now is the freestyle jumps and the boxes and stuff like that. I don't do that anymore. Like I've the fear's too much.
Wow. No, I mean, that's truly incredible, because what you're talking about, your knees, like when I was out there, and this was honestly, I think going back now a decade ago, but I was taking a class and I felt so embarrassed, Charlie, because there was like a 5 or 6 year old in this class. It was just grouped all together for like
Yeah,
beginners. And I'm thinking to myself, that goes to show that you really do. When you start sports, it's so much easier and even better for the child to pick it up earlier, because you're right. The fear factor is totally not there. They'll just do
yeah,
anything. And I mean, that's a really interesting point. But, I'm just so fascinated by competition at its highest level. So you made it to the Olympic trials for Great Britain, like massive accomplishment, first off.
yeah.
But could you walk like myself and the listeners through this journey? What was it like training behind the scenes, everything leading up to that competition?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny. It didn't feel large at the time. And that sounds really stupid to say. It feels bigger now, retrospectively, than it did at the time, because there was a few, let's call it like familiarities. So I was in my, teenagers, oh God, what would I have been, like 13, 14, let's say. And my season for the 4 years previously was going to the British champs, getting into the finals, getting a few medals, being number one in the country, in the country in Britain for several events for many of these years. So you're I knew all the girls who were next to my lane, who were around me, who I was competing against, and there's only a couple of differences that made it feel more special. And it sounds really silly to say, but it was seeing those people that I'd watched on TV, and people walking around with Olympic rings tattoo, and just I was just so mesmerized at watching them all, just watching the tattoos going around and seeing them, and then being placed next to them in a couple of lanes, because there was just one of these two people who were just in that Olympic Commonwealth space that we never got to compete against, and now I'm in their lane. And that was the only thing that to me signaled that I was like, okay, this is a little bit different, because it was in Sheffield, and every single national and British competition for the 5 years previously was at this pool, was at this venue. So I knew this venue inside and out, so I was almost coming home, but with just this slight difference. And then obviously the merch was really good. And I've not kept much merch from over the years, because you end up with piles and piles of it. But I still have my Olympic trials top, and I still have my Olympic trials tracksuit and stuff. And you don't get these, by the way, you have to buy them. And I'm so glad I bought them, because they are so precious to me. They are hid in some storage room back in the UK.
No, that is unbelievable. I mean, to think of, even when you first start, like a young child, most of the time has that goal of going to the Olympics, of making it to the top. And I must say that swimmers, in my opinion, are arguably one of the hardest working athletes I have ever witnessed. And the reason I say that is I got to see it firsthand in college. And I thought our workouts were difficult. I mean, you had not only training, but you had strength and conditioning in the morning. You also had class XYZ. But when I look at the swimmers, their specific workouts, you would see them running in the morning, then you would see them in the pool, and then they come back after, like later on in the afternoon, to
Yeah.
come back to swim. And so I'm so curious, like your mindset when you were in the pool. What was those goals going through your mind when you actually realized that you could make it to the Olympic trials? Were you setting goals? Are you a big goal setter in general, or were you just enjoying the sport and realizing that you had a lot of talent in it?
Yeah, I'd say my approach, my mentality, my thought process is I'd say exponentially 1,000 times better now than it was then. And I will be really honest about that. And you can say like every summer we do have a bit of a screw loose to just take on that routine. And it's the best way that I explain it. It's like the frog in the pot mentality, because we've all been swimming basically since we're two, since we're three, and you don't just start on that routine. It's like when you're five, you do a little bit more swimming. When you're six, you do a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. So by the time you're in your teens, you're like, ooh, how on earth am I doing this routine? So yeah, the routine is for people to know. It's like you're up at 4:35. You're in the pool by 5:30. You do 2 hours training. You then get to school. You do school for the full day. You go straight back to training. 2 hour session. Sometimes then with like that, we call it the 1 hour of land training, and then you do get a lot of homework on top of that. So you do have to start making some choices. Now I decided I'll do some of the homework that I have to get done, but if I could copy off people, I'd copied off so many people to get my homework done. And I was brutally honest, because looking back, I don't think it would physically possible for me to actually do all of my homework on top of the swimming stuff. And it wasn't I got into tension several times for being late for school because I was coming from swim practice. So school's not supporting you either. So you're literally fighting against the school system, and then you're getting pressure from your swim coaches at the same time with all of these big demands and different pressures. So there is a part of almost denial, like some naivety and some denial of not trying, of all of these different variables does go into place. But then it's that it really does boil down to your habits and down to your routines. And so we did have mobility. We were constantly training our joints, training our movements. You do get to a point where in swimming, people think you are just like going up and down a pool. There's not. It's a massive mental game. So because you're thinking like a typical workout would be 8 times 200. So 200 in a 25-meter pool in the UK or an average pool, normal pool. So it's 8 lengths. And we have to, without looking at a clock, you have to time all of your splits perfectly in order to hit the percentage against your best time, if that makes sense. So you're doing that, everything's by feel, everything is by how many arm strokes are you doing per length, are you hitting your turn correctly, are you getting the most efficiency out of it. So your brain is thinking and concentrating on the details all the time. And actually you'll see that 2 hour training session will fly by because you're working on these like little micro decisions all the time. And yeah, I think that really answers his question, because there's loads more into it. Was that when I say, oh, like actually I could have been better, I feel like we could have been better from a nutrition standpoint, it could have been better from a sleep standpoint, we could have been better actually the stuff that wasn't in the pool. Like we were so good in the pool, but actually could have been better outside of the pool, which is interesting.
That is very interesting. And just that point from when you were talking about, obviously at the highest level here you were at in swimming, and then you're transitioning over into CrossFit now.
Yeah.
And the reason I want to pick up right there is, just like you were saying, swimming is so intensive. And not only that, it's like mental. I
Yeah.
have been told, like, oh, Courtney, you should go into CrossFit, but I don't know. It kind of intimidates me. I'm not going to lie. And I just find
Yeah.
that really admirable to put yourself through those very difficult workouts. What made you go from high level swimming over into CrossFit?
Yeah, absolutely. So by the time I got to university, I was pretty much burnt out from swimming. And it's you'll see that if you it's quite common that if you had a lot of success, particularly early on, because then so much pressure and so much overtraining and everything can happen within the sport. Like, I'm certainly not the only one. I got to university and I was completely burnt out, and that's how the skiing came in. I was like, oh great, I need a sport that I just love to do, and it was so sociable and it was great and it was really good 3 years. But then by the time I finished college, um, there's this little itch that is really embedded into your DNA if you've done a high level competition for what was probably like 15 years at this point plus. So I looked around and I was like, well, I'm not really a runner. I'm such a power athlete sprinter. I tried to look for the gymnastic halls and I was really struggling to find any like regular adult classes
Mhm.
and things. Just wasn't anything available. And I remembered I did a bit of fun with like an ex at the time of CrossFit, and I was like, oh, that was really sociable. That was really fun. Let me just try it. Anyway, tried it, and just actually what really drew me to the sport was the social community side of it. And I was like, great, I'm learning new skills, I'm learning new things. There's a whole ton of variety here for me. It's only like an hour or two a day, so it's not like time intensive. Like time intensive compared to what my mentality is, by the way. Compared to swimming, it wasn't time intensive. Um, and then because that then itch gets scratched, I'm like, oh, there's competitions here, there's leaderboards here. And my whole goal for the very, very first day was I just wanted to be what's called an RX athlete, where I just wanted to be able to master all the different elements that was in CrossFit. And I will say, I probably only became an RX athlete like 2 years ago, because there's such high level movements, and then new movements got added in over this last 10-year period. I've just been chasing that, and because I've been chasing actually not even the leaderboard, I've been chasing like just the skill and the technical element of it. That's like what's thrown me up to the kind of top of the leaderboard.
I think that's incredible. And you're so right. Like, right after you compete in high level sports, I felt it was such a transition outwards, because exercising now was that idea that you were not necessarily exercising towards anything. Like, for example, like, okay, you're in gymnastics, you're training for these events and for competition.
Mm-hmm.
And like now you're just doing it for your health. And I'm like, okay, yes, it's motivating, but to an only like certain extent. I really don't have to go today if I don't want to. But I will say, like, as the time would go on, it's almost as if I cannot not exercise, because
Yeah.
I do like it. I feel good when I do exercise, of course. But I think it's interesting that you mentioned the competition part.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm at that point where I can't really find anything else that I'm like good at, because to your point, when you spoke about running, gymnast, of course, and you know this, like sprint athletes. I mean, an
Yeah.
hour, and not an hour, but a minute 30 on each beam and floor. That's like tops. And
Yeah.
then here I am. I want to become a runner. Like, that's Courtney. I don't know if you're like made for that. I don't even know if you have that endurance, but I want to hear more about the competitive level of CrossFit and where you are exactly in your journey.
Yeah, because I'm actually now like I feel like at the end of like my competitive journey, and it's so I'm now going through. You're talking to me at work. I'm at the very start of a new phase that I'm working on for my own self, but it's been great. So the highest ranking I've got was 500 in the world, so that's like the 0.1% of that of the sport. And it's really challenging to kind of year on year see if you've progressed or not, because the workouts change every single time, the structure's been changing every single time. It is really a sport about, can you adapt to the unknown? And like you said, it is intimidating, it is different, scary, but for me it excites me, because I know I've got some variables that I wish I can train towards, but at least I've got a little bit of like, oh, this is something different, this is something new, and I think that's what's been holding my attention. So yeah, no, and then because there's so many different disciplines, as you say, when I've same as you, I've only ever trained up to max 2 minutes, really at the sweet spot of 30 seconds to 1 minute. And then in CrossFit, some of these workouts are 20 minutes long. Well, you can see in the rankings that I fall quite significantly down, but then it's given me a goal. It's given me a purpose to be like, okay. But I think when I first started out, I was like 20,000 in the world. And then we've just done the open, and it was a very cardio heavy base. And now I'm 1,000 in the world for the stuff I'm really bad at, and that's like a huge, like, yeah, okay, that's a big win. That's a great win. That's taken 10 years to do. Whereas if you put some of the really heavy stuff in, I tend to shoot up to the top 150 to 200 in the world. So it depends on what discipline you're asking me to be where I would rank.
Charleh, you're an inspiration to me, because just listening to you, I'm thinking like it's a very intense, what should I say, like program, if you will. Is
Yeah.
that
I like to say program because I obviously started off very as like a social thing, got sucked into the competitive world and elements of it. And I say, like, I'm going through this transition because there is a part of exercising for your health, exercising for social life, but still it not just like, oh, I'm turning up to the gym. It's very much like, okay, I'm now training myself to be ready for anything. So if you said to me, hey, do you want to go run a marathon? I'd be like, great, I'm ready for that. I'm trained for that. Or, hey, do you want to go, I don't know, do this swim activity? Or do you want to go ski this thing? Or do you want to go this, whatever. This is what my nutrition coach says. It's like, hey, let's be ready for anything. So if somebody says, hey, do you want to do something? You can just say yes. And that's now the new phase I'm at. So it's not like I'm competing against this leaderboard. I'm almost just competing against myself to do new and different things.
No, that's incredible. So here we are, Charleh. You're now involved in CrossFit, but then you also excel in business in general, let alone you have a strong passion for marketing. So I would love to speak about in this next conversation about even like crossover lessons that you have been able to take from sport into your career, and then how your passion developed for marketing.
Well, I have it on. Let's start off with a cliche. I hate cliches, but sometimes they are a cliche for a reason. So in sport, you are learning new skills all the time, but your safety net of where you end up is actually a lot lower than it is in business. So if, for example, I'm learning a new skill, if I fail at this new skill, where am I at? Well, it's just your ego's just been hurt. Okay, you can get, what's stopping you from picking yourself back up and trying again? It's just yourself. It's just your ego.
Right.
In business, if you fail, there is the likelihood that you could lose your home, you lose your income, lose your life, lose your relationships. That safety net is, it can be, and I say can be, quite harsh, but there's different rungs of failure, and the idea is you always want to be aiming to kind of fail high. And I think just being able to learn that lesson of learning to fail and fail high is a far easier way to learn it through sport, because like you said, that safety net is not as harsh. So if you do 15 years or 20, well, I'm in my 30s, so decades of failing every single day at something on a very micro safe environment place really is an incredibly transferable skill, because then when I have failed in business so many times, I've learned how and where I can fail, what lessons then I've learned. So now I have the phrase, and I think I told you this before, is if something's not going well or I'm failing, I go, right, what is the lesson I'm learning here, and how can I turn this into an opportunity? So you develop this mindset. And obviously the word that everybody bats around is resilience, and it's not even necessarily resilience, because you're not trying to like fight all the time. It's actually how can you quickly react to the situation. And when you first fail, it'll take you a long time to react back and pick yourself up and get going. But the more times you do it over and over again, you'll find you will just snap into it 2 seconds later. So the failure happens, you go, right, what am I learning here? Great, what action can I be doing? And you're not even fighting ego at that point, so you're not even fighting yourself.
No, that's so true because I love this conversation on like quote failure because we've spoken about this certainly on the podcast, but that idea from sport, I think like especially gymnastics, as you know, I mean, I talk about it a lot, but you physically could just get like slammed to the ground, both figuratively and literally. And so, like, the humility kicks in right away to pick yourself back up. And then also, too, that idea of I remember loving the sport so much that that passion would pull me through those times when I quote did fail. And so being able to translate that into business, and you're so right. I wanted you to expand upon that part when you talk about like the ego and even like fearing of taking that next step because, oh, wow, like if I do fail, like I'll be viewed in a certain way from people. So, how do you overcome that? In the business capacity, if you will, to risk sometimes.
Yeah, I think let's break it down into three. So one, again, it's perspective thing of we live in a world of spotlight syndrome. So if you know that you live in your own spotlight and you think in your own world, and everybody else is also living in their own spotlight and living in their own world, they're actually not watching you. You know, there's not as many people watching you as you think, and if people aren't watching you, well, what's that phrase where you might as well go dance in a park naked because really nobody cares, really? And so take a little bit of pinch of that.
Charlie, you're hilarious. I love your humor. Keep going.
And I've got to. I'm sorry, that's completely lost now.
This is good.
What was the question?
Be honest with you. I was so into that. You said, okay, you're like, okay, I'm going to break it down with 3 points.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. The ego. Because then yes, that's like that ego level. Then it's the practice of once you've failed a whole bunch of times, it becomes a habit. You know, you're training your brain, you're training your body to trying to learn. And when let's like if we see, I think it's like Michael Jordan's actually kind of the most famous person for this. Like you, when he's practicing in his and in the what do you call it, the basketball hall, and he's just shooting hoops over and over and over again. No one's actually watching him. You don't know he's doing that, but you almost have that level of expectation that he must have shot that hoop 500 times and maybe missed like 3/4 of them. But you're not actually remembering that, are you? Or if you look at his stats, I think it's like he's missed 60% of the time and only scored 40% of the time. But you're talking about Michael Jordan here. So what do you actually remember? You only remember the times that he did win. So again, it's this reframing and perspective element of when you're trying to kind of achieve that goal. I can't even remember the third reason is now, but generally, if you just take those two reasons to how, oh no, I do remember risk mitigation. So
Yeah.
if I scale it back to, what is the definition of entrepreneurship? Entrepreneur is a French word. It is mean to take risks, but actually, the funny part of the definition is the best CEOs or the best business people or the best sports people are really good at risk mitigation. So they might see, hey, right, I have this great big idea, or I have this great big skill that I want to learn that it feels impossible to me. It's beyond my imagination for me to even achieve this skill. What are the things that are within my control that I could mitigate that risk of me failing? And what can I do now? Great. What does that list look like? Okay, write down that list. What can I action now? What can I action a week? What can I action a month? And start chipping away at that list. And then you'll find a lot of that risk element or that failure element is gone. And so that goal becomes a lot smaller and how you're going to achieve it. So then the next element is just the doing, which kind of refers back to my previous 2 points.
Just you're right, like being able to pull all those points together, but seeing how you perceive, like it's all about perception. And like you were saying, like specifically like through a certain lens. And to me, I think even to add upon that, it's almost like that idea where if you were able to look at something and if it's not working when you talk about like risk mitigation, but to be able to evolve and adapt And just because you're going down one road and you think it's like going pretty well, but then something comes up, I think being able to take a different, pivot in business or to evolve in a different way than you once started, I think that also, at least in my perception, is able to take away that like failure point of it.
Yeah.
And I look at it as, oh, I made a mistake going this way. Now I'm going to go this way now and try this other path that maybe I should have taken from the beginning, but I didn't quite see it at the
Well, this
beginning.
is exactly why I always say, about the like our imagination and that element of it. So, yeah, one of the things I've certainly learned from the best is imagining bigger. Imagining the impossible, because on that route from A to B, it's only really your imagination and the knowledge that you don't know that's going to stop you from getting there. So, if you're going really, really, really big, you're being backfilled with all of this information as you're going on to that journey, and then they're the pivots and they're the adaptabilities where you just go, oh, okay, I'm now going that direction, but I'm not going to go in a straight line. I'm going to go right, then I'm going to go left, then I'm going to go right, and then I'm going to go left. And just taking in that information, because your imagination is getting better because you're getting fed more information.
I love that. I love the idea of dreaming big. I mean, Charlie, I'm just like all like, what is that saying? See, here we go with the sayings that I always mess up. Oh my gosh.
We're the worst.
Go big or go home. There we go. No, I flipped that other one, and that other one was pretty funny. I mean, that's going to go down in the books. But it's true. Like, I really do feel like at a certain point, being able to use your imagination and stretch how far you could potentially go, I
Yeah.
think that kind of, it's almost like exciting in a way. And I don't know if that stems from competitive sport too, as well as just being able to not view the quote impossible as literally impossible, but knowing if you break down your goals, being able to build that self-confidence, if you will, you could achieve certain things. And that's why I love sport. Like, I think
Yeah.
sport has so much like foundational knowledge that you're able to take into business, especially as you start climbing into
Yeah.
different levels. So
Well,
Charlie, yes, go
I was going
ahead.
to say, it was like that's one of the things actually us as adults could learn from children. And I think I mentioned this before, in that you ask any child, let's say under like around the ages of 3 to 5, like what do they want to be when they're older? And I like genuinely, I wanted to go to the Olympics, or
Mhm.
you like want to be a policeman, or do you want to be a fireman, or do you want to be, whatever excited job it is. They're 3 and 5. No way do they have any experience, qualifications, or any reasons like why they would want to be, a certain profession. But it's because they've still got that imagination to go big, to think, and that almost that self-confidence that they'll get there somehow. And it's so brilliant to say, like, I say 5-year-olds, because they're actually like 15 years out from that goal, from that vision, and yet they have that incredible self-confidence that they're gonna do it. And sometimes they don't actually go and end up being that person, but they're still, it's okay. And we can just take that as a lesson to how we should be achieving our goals in business, of just like, okay, where do I want my business in 10 years time? Does it have to be fixed? No. But can you dream big? Yes. You'll figure the way out in between.
I love this. And when you were speaking, I was thinking about two things, and I want to ask you what your opinion is. Do you think as we age, we become more settled in the fact of what societal norms are? And so, therefore, your imagination almost lessens in a way because, oh, well, I finished this and you either go in this direction or that direction. You can't imagine or create something new. Not that you can't, but it's just like societal norms. Versus, do you also think that it could be one's ego of that failure point, because it's almost as if like you minimize your imagination because you're too worried to fail, so therefore I'm just going to take a safer route? Like, what are your thoughts on either route, or do
I
you think
think,
both?
I think both, and like whether that it'll slightly vary from person to person. So if they've got a sports background, I do think like if they've really, I mean, really done sports and really worked, they would have lost that ego and they've got more of that resilience to just keep pushing through. But then I also think it's a third element of, we know how hard it is. And sometimes when you know how hard something is, it can give. I do believe it give you a bit of paralysis, because it's like, whew, I know if I start this is going to be a lot of work, and am I ready for this? Do I want to do this?
So
And as
true.
a child, they don't know how hard things are yet. They haven't learned that thing. So almost being comfortable with understanding that everything is hard, and so you got to choose your hard, and what hard is you do want at the end of the day, and whether it is, if something is worthwhile pursuing or not, because not everything is worth pursuing.
Right.
But hopefully that should be the almost like, what's the Captain Jack Sparrow compass? That compass doesn't point north; it just points to the path you should be going on in your career, let's say.
No, that's so true. And I'm just so happy that you brought up that imagination part, because I've actually been thinking about that a lot, that childlike imagination, perception on the world. Like you said, I mean, they just go for things. They don't think necessarily twice. And to your point, like it's realistic as far as certain responsibilities you have to take into,
Yeah.
concern as you do age. I feel like there's so much human potential. I mean, I've spoken to people with certain ideas and I'm just like, just go for it. I mean, in my opinion, you have one life to live. Go for it. you know? But that transitions us. I do want to speak a lot on the business side, because you have a strong passion for marketing. And how did that love and excitement for marketing, where did that actually stem from?
Oh god, again, it's so if my mum was the swimmer, my dad is the business coach and the marketeer. But he was so good in that we were never pushed down a certain career. It was very much guidance on how do you do things, or if you had an interest for something, he would give you the opportunity. And so so KUB is, like I say, I'm the CEO of KUB. It was started and founded by my dad. It really was just his business to be a business coach for small businesses and to do the marketing strategy. But I always say I was there from day one, because my pocket money was to fold the letters, to stamp the letters, and take them to the post office. And that was direct mail in the 90s.
I love it.
So I've never done I never got my pocket money for cleaning or for tidying up the house. That was just a set given, that you had done that as a responsibility in the household, that you would share the load. As like two successful executive parents, they were busy. So that was an expectation. But where I could get my pocket money was, okay, dad's business, could I do some of the admin on some of the spreadsheets? Could I design some of the business cards? Could I design some of the roller banners? Could I design some of the social graphics? It was anything in dad's business that, like, I wanted to get my hands on. Like, my brother didn't really have any interest. It wasn't his thing. And my dad was like, okay, great. I just naturally gravitated to doing more things within it. So actually, I'd already done all of my marketing and, like, what we'd call it, like your internship or apprenticeship stuff by the time I was 15. But then I also had now this was my very own personal interest, and my own thing was human psychology and social behaviors and consumer behaviors. I know it sounds really silly, but from the age of 12, I was buying myself books on body language, communication, negotiation, influence, selling psychology. I was then taking books off my dad's bookshelf. I was naturally just fascinated. And I remember from a very, very young age, I find it fascinating to try and learn this perspective of other people through their lens and through their shoes. That was really at my absolute core. It's my biggest driver of fascination, which then led me onto these books. And so I've always said, I'm actually more of a salesperson, had more of an interest in sales, who has always been a specialist in marketing. That's how I've always phrased and felt for myself, really. And so if you're then completely surrounded by marketing and learning everything about marketing, and I've got just had this such drive to learn about people and how behavior happens and how sales happens and influence happens. They just all interlink together.
But that's so exciting because when you bring up sales, you're so right. I mean, to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and to understand like what they're struggling with and how perhaps your product or your service could actually solve or be the solution to those problems and obviously meeting their need. But marketing to me, without a doubt, like you were saying, I mean, the psychological side of it, I think is so important. I want you to dive into more of like the specifics of marketing and the importance of a vision statement as well as a mission statement. Why are those important
Yeah.
to marketing?
Yeah, because um, it's not even necessarily so like this is not so like correlated with marketing. It's actually we've talked about in sports a lot about habits and talked about a lot of systems and talked about where we want to go for like in that sport of like
Mhm.
what like not, I don't want to say end goal because there's no such thing, but generally where's that next goal post. So if I'm a CEO and I've got this vision, I've got this I'm like my imagination's gone big, I've got this really big idea and things like that. Well, we've got to get that Captain Jack Sparrow compass. It's not guided by north. We've got to have it. That compass has got to guide somewhere to help us make yes and no decisions. And it's the yes and no decisions every single day on a micro level that compound to make the bigger picture. Then how that then relates to marketing is whether your business, because once you've got that business vision, you can then create a business plan. And once you've got a business plan, you've got you've got a sales plan because you've created a product offer. Once you've got that product offer, you know exactly what the pain points of your ICP is. You know exactly where they hang out, what's going to resonate with you. So it's this waterfall effect. And if the vision's not clear, the direction's not clear, trying to make those yes and no decisions for that business, sales, and marketing alignment is incredibly hard because it will just feel like chaos. And I live in this world of the under 10, that 1 in 10 million. So this advice I would say is very tailored towards that business in that bracket where you have to be incredibly prescriptive in what you're doing on an every single day level because you don't have the resources to make mistakes or to spread yourself thin with too many yeses or too many nos. So and there's then final little detail point where I've worked with business owners where the vision isn't clear. And if you have really good team members who are self-starting, who are highly motivated, who are very passionate, and usually very, very good at what they do, you don't need to manage them. You just need to tell them where's the vision, what's the mission, what's the purpose, and what is the objective we're trying to achieve, and they will tell you what will need to be done. And this is about having the right team members around you, and that collaborative. So I hope that makes sense. It's a whole like a spider web underneath, but I always say, as a starting point, get that vision right. That's your compass to how you're going to guide your team, guide your structures, guide your business plan, and just be efficient really with our very finite amount of time that we have every single day.
I 100% I agree with you. And I feel you're right. I mean, when you do have limited resources, you have to ensure that the direction and the steps being taken from the beginning to the end are going to match up pretty effectively and efficiently because like I said, you don't have a lot of resources. And so having that large vision and mission, but at the same time narrowing it down to understand how that could actually turn into the direction that you're going to go and the types of resources to be able to use effectively, I think so important. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Now, marketing obviously is changing. It seems like daily. I mean, you even add AI into the factor. I mean, I want you to educate me on that part, Charleh. Where do you start today when it comes to marketing and being, like I said, just ever so evolving?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can tell the difference between a first founder compared to a second, third, or even fifth, founder. And it's a very delicate balance of what is your product offer or service offer. So we're not even at marketing yet, but there is, again, it's understanding the step by steps of how you're going to do the marketing. So, and the reason why I say most people fail at the service offer, the product offer thing, because they'll come to me and say, hey, I'm a web developer, I build websites. Great. that is incredibly broad. It's incredibly highly competitive. If people know blue ocean, red ocean, you're in a red ocean. Those sharks are going to eat you up because you're fighting against everybody. Okay, so what type of web developer are you? What type of businesses do you help? What type of what like culture do you have? What I could go into this 1,000 different ways, but you're seeing just by I'm starting on this ball rolling of just like, how do we make your product offer one look completely different to your competition? And because if you do look like your competition, the only place you can go is down, as in price. Because if you look identical between web developer A, web developer B, and C, if they all look the same, you're obviously going to pick the cheapest option.
Sure.
And we know the survival of every business is cash flow and money coming into, like, new revenue coming into a business. And so if you're at the bottom squeezing all of your profit, squeezing all of your money because you're just playing the price game, you're going to fail at some point. So before we even go out to the market, we've got to figure out, how do you look different? How do you really connect and resonate with your ICP? And so I say ICP as in your ideal customer persona, because you might have, you not only are you looking for your target market, but you're looking for the person that's going to be the most profitable, the most enjoyment to work with, the ones who's got the disposable income, the biggest need, they're in the growing demand for your business. These are all the variables to just try to make this as airtight as possible. So let's say we get your product offer 80%. It's pretty much 80% done. Then get into the market, because let's say you're a no code web developer for the 1 million turnover tech business. You'll understand all of their absolute needs, and you'll understand where they hang out. So let's just say, for ease, they're hanging out on LinkedIn. Great. We now have a starting point on where we could be marketing your business, because they're hanging out on LinkedIn. Let's go hang out with them, and let's make sure we can get the right message to them in the right place. Principally on a very surface level way. That's it. That really is it.
To me, like, just listening to you like go through the process, you're right. It's not like just starting at marketing, but you have to look at the big picture. That's what I was drawing from when you were beginning, was you really do have to see, I mean, at more of a macro perspective, what your budget is, how you're going to actually implement the type of marketing with certain resources that you have.
Yep.
And so that brings me to my next question, which is like, how much do you actually allocate towards your marketing efforts in your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So, because just like to really link the 2 points together, you'll notice that I said, get your product off to 80%, or then just get started onto your marketing, because you're going to go through a lot of iteration. You're going to go through a lot of testing, improving, and that's constant. So that, let's call like 5% of your turnover is testing, iterating, and failing and experimenting. Let's call it let's not call it experiment. Let's failing. Let's call it experimenting. Just
Love it.
Just bouncing ideas. Just like I did a campaign last year. I got 0 back, but I enjoyed testing it. It helped me improve some of my messaging. It improved my pitching. It was I thought it was a good experiment. Cost a couple of £1,000, $1,000. Okay, we wasted something. That's fine. Okay, I learned something from that. We're not going to do that one again for a while.
I love it.
That, again, like I said, it's like you need to have that 5% of your turnover, your profits, to go towards that. Then your actual marketing, your marketing systems, the things that you just proven playbooks and proven like your habits and systems that's going behind your marketing, that should always be 10%. The biggest mistake I always find is they go, great, okay, 10%, I can do that. 10%, like let's say they're in position A, they get 10%, we're going to allocate it to all of this marketing things. Great, then they see a 20% growth into their business, but that 10% never changes. They go, well, the same budget got me the same results. And it's like, well, no, that's 10%. That budget was for that size of business. You're now a bigger business. You now need to work out what's those next steps to keep reinvesting your resources to keep growing to be the size of business that you want to be. And I'll give you an example is I like to put some numerics behind this. The things that got you from 0 to 500,000 isn't going to be the same things that gets you from 500,000 to 1 million and so forth. The things that get you from 1 million to 5 million is not going to be the same, and 5 to 10. And they are very specific scaling up points in businesses that people hit roadblocks because the things that did work will no longer work, and it needs different budgets and it needs different structures. And that's the change and evolution that the stages of your business needs to go. So if you work on a core of 10 to 15%, so 10 for your business, 15%, let's call it the fun fund, and you then readjust them on a percentage of where your business is at, it will help you get through those different scaling roadblocks.
Wow. That's a lot to take in. Well, because I think that's a really good point, is just not from experience, but just listening to you, like certain points you really do have to readjust even your certain allocation of how much you aim for your marketing. Charleh, I want to talk to you all day long, but I'm going to be respectful of your schedule. I've had a blast. I've learned so much, at least on like the marketing side, listening at more of like a higher viewpoint that I've never experienced before. And I've taken a lot of like good tips and pieces of advice. I would love to round out this. It's already a positive podcast for that matter, as far as episode. But if you have a positive phrase or a positive quote.
Yeah, so it's actually a fairly famous quote, but I always think it's just so beautiful. So it's from The Alchemist, a very worldwide book. And it's, when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it.
Ooh, I love that. Could you elaborate on that?
So before I even read this book, I just always had this big belief in like the universe of just, I don't know, it was just like if things happen to me, I just always had this mindset of just like, okay, the universe wants it, there'll be something better will come along, like we just keep going kind of things. And then I read this book, and it was at a time where it was like pre-meeting my now husband. It was just after the pandemic. So in the UK, we just like really just come out of quarantine for 18 months. Like I was living in a city centre apartment, so I really was in a box for 18 months. And I was traveling again, and I just had this big ambition. I was like, I really want to move to America. I just want to travel more. I just wanted to had some business goals. I really just wanted to meet that person. I just had all of these different goals in my head of just, and I didn't want to settle either. Like I was just like, no, this is what I wanted. This is who I want. This is how I want it, and everything. And it's really, really hard to explain this feeling. But then from that trip in America, reading that book for then the next 18 months, everything just went bing, clink, clink, click, 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 all fell into place. Like, so I came back, to give perspective, like as a bit of context, I came back from America. I then chatted for the first time with my now husband 2 days later. A week later, we went on our first date. And then after 18 months, we got married. And we celebrate our first anniversary next week. And, and it was just, I can't explain it. It was just like, none of that, I could have planned none of it. None of the stuff in the last 18 months to 3 years at all. And it really just like, I had this idea, and then the universe just helped me put things in front of me and it just conspired to help me, essentially.
No, I love that. And it reminds me of like journaling. I've certainly spoken about journaling, but that idea of thinking through your thoughts, writing them down, and also too, just to add in there, like that idea of positive affirmations. I've been on this like big thing with positive affirmations when I first wake up. And it really puts you in literally like a positive mindset, not to be so like cliche here with
Yeah,
on
yeah, yeah.
positivity, but I'm serious. Like, I feel like if my mind's going in one direction when I first wake up thinking, certain things I have to do, I all of a sudden take a step back and I focus on like, literally positive affirmations,
Mhm.
positive sayings, positive things. And you're right. Like, it changes your mindset. And before you know it, like 6 months down the road, what you have literally wrote in your journal, it came to fruition, maybe not in the exact way, but it was pretty darn close. And you're looking back, you're like, how did that happen? Man, the universe is powerful. Positive thoughts all the way now.
Well, exactly, because even sometimes when you miss the original goal, when you actually kind of get to the goal post, like you're happy about it anyway, because you're just like, damn, that was pretty close, but I'll take this. This is great, you know. And with train, it's just that micro training the body and the mind to just be like, no, I'm gonna wake up. It's gonna be a good day. Things are gonna be good, and you start looking for the good in kind of
Mhm.
everything, and just that like that positive energy that like it's surging through you, you'll find things will flow a lot quicker and a lot easier if you're not fighting yourself. You're actually your body is fighting for you.
That's so true. That idea of things do not happen to you, but they happen for you. So I love it. Charleh, it has been an amazing time. I'm going to have you back for part two of this conversation because truthfully, I have learned so much within marketing and certainly now with my business. I mean, I'm just like soaking in all this knowledge. So I would love to have you back. Thank you for all the
Yeah,
sport lessons that you shared. And really, I wish you all the best, Charleh.
it's been amazing as always.